Welcome everybody to the final webinar on the WP Agencies Summit. And I am joined by Nick Adams, the COO of WP Buffs, one of our gold sponsors. And we are going to talk about scaling your monthly recurring revenue in this webinar. But before we dive into that, let us know from where you are joining us, because this really is a global event. And I would love to see in the comments from where we have attendees on this webinar. That will be super cool to see on the last webinar, to see how many countries we are actually impacting with our content. And don't be shy, ask your questions. I even received a few questions up front, so we're definitely going to cover those. Leo, if you're watching this right now, we are definitely going to get you the answers. And Nick, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Can you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you're doing at WP Buffs?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm the COO here at WP Buff, so that means I oversee all of the day-to-day operations and just make sure that things are running. So I just kind of keeping an eye over things and kind of captain the whole team here. And so I can actually give a little more information on my background and my history here at WP Buffs. So I was hired in summer of 2017 as a happiness buff, which is what we call our support people who aren't actually working on the sites. Even though I have a background as a developer, I was previously a developer writing plugins and themes and building sites. I then moved over.
Hey, James from Washington. Hey. Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's fine. Yeah, so I did that, and at the time we had 3 developers on the team, and we had about 90 sites. And then as I grew with the company, we hired another happiness buff, and then I became the lead happiness buff in the fall of 2017. And she's still with us today on the happiness team, doing a great job. And so at the time, then we also had about 100 sites and 4 developers. So that was a few months after I started. And then we hired a 3rd happiness buff in the spring of 2018, who people got to meet earlier. That's Dean. And so Dean has also moved up from that position, as I'm sure you saw if you watched his session. He's now our head of customer success. But at the time, we had about 150 sites and 5 developers. So we were growing and we were scaling. And that's when we started in that year, fall of 2018 is when we moved Dean to customer success buff. And we also added a marketing buff. And then I was moved to COO. All around that same time. And at that point, we had about 250 sites. So you can see we'd just about done like a scale of 3 times what it was when I started about a year or earlier. And so then we had 2 support team members who were just dedicated to happiness buffs. And then we had 7 developers by that time.
That is a really interesting insight in how many people you need to manage a certain number of sites. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah. And so this is pretty consistent with, as we've grown, these numbers have also scaled pretty much with the same ratio of sites to team members.
That is really interesting. And you have a presentation for us. So let me bring that up on the screen real quick. Again, as I've said, feel free to interrupt us at any time if you have questions. That's what we're here for. And with that being said, Nick, take it away.
All right. Yeah. So then we continued to scale after that. So here I'll jump into that. But you can see that now, growing up, we've grown up to over 700 sites. We've got 4 full-time support team members, 13 developers, and so. Yeah, we've really started to scale. So first I'm going to go into some of the ways that we scaled, because this whole thing is about our MRR and everybody's scaling your MRR. So I'm going to show some ways that we did that. So on going a little more into my history, when I started with WP Buffs, we were selling our lowest level plan for $40 a month. Our Perform plan was our middle tier plan for $80 a month, and then our Perform plan Pro for $120 a month. The following year, we went up by about 20% on each plan. And so you can see that then, our prices went up, but stayed pretty proportional. And then another year later, so last spring, about a year and a half ago, our prices went up again. And you can see that now, our maintain plan has still stayed pretty low, but each plan went up by about 50% of what they were, a little more than 50% growth. And so that's made a huge impact on our MRR. So throughout this presentation, I'm really going to go over how we were able to do this. Why didn't we lose all of our customers when we raised our prices that much in what's really, less than 2 years, a short period of time. And the ways that we've been able to grow our MRR, we've been able to scale it because we've been able to raise our prices by making sure that we have things in place. So my very first point is something that I always like to make sure that we remember, which is that you need customers to make money. Which I think everybody's first reaction to me saying that is, duh. Of course you need customers to make money. You can't have MRR if you have no RR. You need that recurring revenue, and that has to come in from someone. But what I mean by that is that your customers help you grow. They're on your team. A lot of times people think of customers as kind of somebody outside, and they almost can get a bit of like an adversarial relationship with their customers, where instead it's, the customer's trying to take something from us and we're trying to take something from them by getting their money. They're trying to get our time or our products. But really, we like to think of it more like we're all on the same team. Our customers are part of the WP Buffs team. And that's one of those things that's really helped us to grow our MRR, is that when the recurring revenue is growing by both increasing our prices and increasing our number of customers, we're bringing all these people into the team and everybody's getting a buy-in. So all of these customers are buying into what we're doing. They're invested in us just as much as we are in them, because they need us to continue to grow and continue to provide more value, so that they get their value and they get their money's worth. And we need them so that we can grow. But the main thing there is that acquiring them is just the first step. That's where a lot of people go wrong with MRR, is they look at acquiring the customer as kind of the only step. They think, well, I just need to get the customer. So they focus just so much on sales. Everything is about sales and marketing. I just got to get the people. But they don't think about what happens once you get those people. Because the fact of the matter is that new customers are more expensive. When you bring somebody on for the first time, they're going to cost you more money than if they're on for 6 months or more. That's just how it is. From a management perspective and from a customer happiness perspective, it's the crucial time is those first couple of months. People ask for more things. If you're selling a product, people are going to come to you more for all of their support questions, almost definitely at the beginning. Yeah, they may have 1 or 2 down the road, but if they're going to have 10 questions, it's going to be as soon as they sign up, as soon as they start using your product or your service. So for an agency, that means that you don't want to just keep getting new customers and then kind of throw away the other ones, because the new customers are the ones who are not going to make you as much money. Your margins are going to be lower. And in order to scale your MRR, you have to keep those people on. And the way we do that is through good support, because good support can fix any issue. What I mean by that is that no business or product is ever going to be perfect. You can try and think of one that is. There's a lot of talk right now because Apple just unveiled a whole bunch of new products. The new iPhones just got started pre-ordering yesterday. Everybody's talking about them. But do you remember when iPhone had antenna issues? This was several years ago now. We're talking a ways back. But they had an issue where if you held your iPhone just in a certain way, it actually cut out the antenna. It's they actually had to
remember.
Yeah, I remember they had to ship those silicone.
And these bumpers just around the outside edge. Yeah.
And then, do you remember when the iPhones would bend? Especially when they came out. I think it was when they first came out, the Max iPhones, especially.
Yeah, Bendgate.
Yeah.
And now they just stopped innovating, and that's why they are perfect now.
Yeah, they're not doing anything crazy. But I think what really caused them to be successful from that was that when the issue happened, it was how they responded. And that really is what determines how the customer feels. So what I found was that like when the issue has happened with Apple, Apple didn't just say, okay, well then don't hold your phone there. They acknowledged that there was an issue and they sent out those new like silicone bumper things to help people. Same with the iPhones. When people's iPhones bent, Apple said, okay, here's a new phone. And then they tried to address that in future engineering because the issue was if you put a lot of pressure, especially if you put it in your back pocket, it's going to bend. I mean, I can do that with a lot of metal products. It wasn't just iPhones. But then they also tried to address it from an engineering perspective and making sure that the cases couldn't bend as easily. But you look at now, and Apple was the first $1 trillion company in the U.S. Like, they had just so much money, and so
it's insane.
Yeah, they just have so much money. They're worth so much. So their value is just continuing to grow year after year, and a lot of that is because people love Apple. I mean, I'm right now talking to you from my Apple computer, and right next to me is my Apple phone, and that's because not just because they have good products, which I think they do, but a lot of it also has to do with how they deal with issues. When I've had other products that go bad, a lot of times the manufacturers or even the company that's selling it, they kind of, after your first 30 days, they say, well, you're on your own. You can pay us $300 and we'll send you a used one. But
yeah.
But like recently, I had an issue with my AirPod Pros because there turned out there was an issue that happened with some of them. I was kind of one of those day one adopters of the AirPod Pros, and it turns out there's a bit of an issue where some of them could have like a crackle noise, and so Apple, they said let's replace it, and it turned out just replacing the one didn't fix it. So rather than saying, okay, well then if this is a bigger issue, maybe we'll repair it, they said, well, do you just want a whole new set? They just gave that to me.
Nice.
Yeah, they said so.
It's a good example of support.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, yeah, you can bet that I'm gonna buy more Apple products if that's how they take care of me when something goes wrong. And so that's one of those big things that you have to remember is that it's not just if an issue happens, because I can guarantee you an issue is going to happen. You name a business, and I bet we can find 10 examples or more of times when they had something go wrong.
Yeah, and especially when you're providing maintenance services, at some point the website will go down, the website will get hacked. Your customer does something stupid, installs a plugin and breaks the entire site. They deactivate the theme by accident, what have you. You just have to deal with that in the right way. I totally agree with that.
Yeah. So that's one of those things that really affects your MRR is you have to keep these people, and by doing that, you have to support them. Because if people don't feel supported after they've been sold on something, they're going to leave you.
Yeah.
So you need to start planning things, and you really want to think about issues your customers have or may have, and have a support strategy ready from day one. Yeah, you can always be reactive. So, you can start up an agency or a maintenance company and just wait for people to tell you what issues they have. Or you can also start thinking about what issues might they have. What things are usually hard for people. The understanding how to use something. If you're setting people up with a new website and you're going to put a page builder on it, most likely they're going to have some issues with it. I haven't found a single page builder in WordPress where I haven't run into at least some issues. And I'm a developer, so I can figure these things out pretty quickly. I can read the documentation and figure out, is there something I'm understanding? And I can open up a support ticket. Not everybody can do that. They may not even know what to do, so they may just say, okay, I hired this agency. This agency gave me a website that I can't edit. I can't put my own blog posts on it. And they're going to get upset, and they may look for somebody else who's going to take care of them. So if you have a support strategy ready from day one, that's really a key. And so that's where you need to think things through. So you need to think through the how of what you're going to do. Whether you're opening up a design agency, whether you're opening up a plugin company or a theme company or a maintenance company like what we do here at WP Buffs, you need to think through the how of what you're going to do. You don't want to just kind of open up and say, okay, we're a business now, everyone come to us. You don't want to sell people on something that you have no idea how you're going to do it. And that really comes in the form of standard operating procedures. Because you want to be proactive and not reactive. You want to have things in place so that you know what to do.
There's actually a really good question that came in from Leo Koo, and I'm sure we'll tackle this throughout the presentation. I just want to weave it in so we don't forget that. He asked, what's the best way to have a standard operating procedure so that we can scale the team?
That's a great question. Yeah, so standard operating procedures are clutch. That's one of those things that is a bit of an ongoing process with your company. So it's not something you're going to do once and leave as is. But the most important way to do it is to get people on board with how you're going to do your standard operating procedures. You don't want to do a top-down standard operating procedure if you're trying to scale a company. There are a lot of great theories about how you get people on board and how you do that, and a lot of change theory, which even if you're not trying to change things, except the only change is you're trying to make things more organized, you kind of want to take those in. And so when you look at what the most popular change theories are out there, some of them that have been going around for like years, like decades now, they teach these different things, and one of the most important things is you need to get buy-in from everybody on your team. So when you're putting together standard operating procedures, you want to make sure that there's something that the whole team understands. So you want to look at what you're trying to do and think of best practices. Do some research if you have to, but get people involved. If you've got 2 people on your company, you're brand new, get you 2 people to look at it together and just say, what are things that we should be doing? Come up with your company values, because that's a big important part of your standard operating procedures too. Is what are our values? What do we want to do? What do we aspire to do? And so that's how you can really build those.
Yeah, that reminds me of something I had with my VA in the preparation of the summit, where she was doing the transcriptions and then she faced an issue because I just sent her all the MP4 files, which were like 2 gigabyte, 3 gigabyte, all the recordings, and she would upload them to a service to have them transcribed by AI, otter.ai, and then she went through it to correct what the AI got wrong. And she just came to me and said, let's make a process out of this where you give me the MP3 file, because I cannot upload like 1 gigabyte or bigger to otter.ai, which I wasn't aware of because I wasn't doing the task. So it's really important to get the person who executes the SOP involved. Also, as you said, to get buy-in and to make them feel responsible for the process as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Because especially as the leaders, if you're running an agency or you're running a company or you're even just one of the managers, if you try and do everything top down and just say, this is how we're going to do it, and you don't let people tell you something that they think may work better, you're going to end up with a whole bunch of things that don't work. I've learned that if I mess up 10 times in a day, it's a good day. I get all the time. So I know I can't. Same with Joe, our CEO. He doesn't know everything. Nobody does. The people at the head of every massive company, they don't know everything. That's why they surround themselves with people who do know bits and pieces of things, and why you need to work collaboratively. So that's absolutely, when you're building that and you're thinking things through, you need to do that. And one of the things you can do with that is come up with at least 3 worst case scenarios. And I like to do that for pretty much anything. Think of, what could possibly go wrong? If you're an agency and you're building sites, worst case scenario is your development site that you've built for somebody, assume it's going to crash. Assume that the development server is going to become completely corrupted and unrecoverable. And so you need to come up with those SOPs, those standard operating procedures, of how would we deal with that? And obviously the answer is hopefully backups. Hopefully your answer is, I'm going to back this up. But if instead it's like us or a maintenance company, and we rely on support tickets. So we need to have that. What's the worst case scenario? Worst case scenario for us is that our ticketing system goes down and we can't see tickets and people can't send us tickets. So we've had to deal with what do we do? And I can tell you that's happened. Thankfully, it's only happened once for hours. And that one was a bit out of our control. But what we did was we have an email address that we use. And so we were actually able to use it as a backup. So all of our tickets go into an email address first and then get forwarded into our ticketing system. So what that means is we have that redundancy. And so that's part of our standard operating procedure, is making sure that everything goes into an email first. Same with all of our white label partners. And I'm going to go a little more into our white label partnership a little bit later on. But same with all of them. Everything goes into an email address first and then goes into the ticketing system. The benefit of that is if the ticketing system were to go down for hours, or hopefully never this would happen, but if it does days where we can't access the tickets in the ticketing system, we can still access them in the email, because now we've got the tickets in two places, and then we can respond to people in the email. And we've done that. The one time it went down for hours, I just switched the entire team over. Okay, now we're checking just the email. We're not going to use the ticketing system. We're going into that email account.
Isn't beautiful, but it's going to save you in these situations. Yeah. What type of ticketing system do you recommend?
Yeah, so we use Teamwork Desk. We found that it works really well, especially because of our white label setup. We're able to set up a specific inbox for all of our white label partners, so that people who work with us, we can have a separate inbox within our ticketing system, so that support emails from their customers can be sent to their email address, and it comes into a specific section so that the customer never has to hear about WP Buffs. And so we like that system. A lot of the ticketing systems don't allow us to really do that. There are other ones that we've worked with. Help Scout has been pretty good. It doesn't scale quite the same way as Teamwork Desk. But I think one of the most important things for choosing a system, a support system, is to figure out what are you trying to do and what do you want to do 2 years from now, and then pick the one that's going to be able to do both. You don't want to be short-sighted, and that's what I see people do a lot, is they just look for what's going to help me today? And then they get into that, but then the problem is you're going to end up with technical debt later when you've now gotten yourself into the system, and then as soon as you've outscaled it, well, then you have to switch systems to one that's actually going to work for what you want to do. So that's how we picked our system, and so that's why we use Teamwork Desk, because it allows us to scale. The other thing that ticketing system allows us to do is automate. So I'm glad that you asked that question, because that's one of those important things for if you're trying to scale your MRR, you need to automate. You cannot do everything yourself. You need to work smart and not hard. Just like you were talking about with your VA, where they were uploading things to have it automatically transcribed, so that she didn't have to manually transcribe the entire thing and spend hours on each talk just trying to transcribe it. That's exactly a perfect example. You're working smart and not hard. And that's one of the most important things we do here, is that we try to systematize and automate as much as possible at WP Buffs. We always want to have that friendly feel, whether it's working with our direct customers or working with our white label partners customers. We want everybody who contacts us to feel a personal connection. So even if we are saying that we are, WP Buffs, or we're saying that we're agency ABC, we still want to have that personal connection. And so we automate things like that by having our automatic responders be as customized as possible. And then also our team uses things like canned responses, where we use variables to pull in as much information. And there are all sorts of tools. So you need to think about what things take the most of your time and then automate it. We do that on a monthly basis. That's one of my tasks as COO, is I look at what's taking up our time and how can we automate it. We use Zapier a lot That's a really cool tool. I also, for my own personal stuff, I use IFTTT, which stands for if this, then this, which is pretty much the same thing as Zapier. It just is a little bit different in what it does, the options that they have. Zapier is more on an enterprise, like business level. IFTTT allows me to automate more of my own individual stuff. But they both do great things. And the way that allows us to scale is that what we're doing is we're taking away any of our manual work that doesn't have to be manual. So that's when somebody emails us, making sure that it's not just going into the desk system, but if they use the word urgent, we're getting a special alert that says that. If
smart.
Yeah. That's one of those things that we have set up right. We automated that in the system that if it's a hosting, like if we get a thing that says the site is down, we're getting notifications in a ticket. We're also getting a message in Slack so that our entire team gets notified.
And that's really good to know for potential white label partners too, because when you are handing off your customers to an agency to work on your behalf, you want them to act quickly on these things.
Yep, absolutely. You want to automate so that it allows you to be as efficient as possible and as effective as possible. And so one of the things I also do regularly is I look through the suggestions at Zapier and IFTTT for suggestions. I recommend everyone do that. Even if you only do that once a quarter of the year, just kind of spend an hour or two just going through the suggestions and just start thinking about, don't just try and solve your problems that you know about, but also look at what are things that people are doing that you may not have ever thought about yourself. And so whether that is if you know that you want emails from a specific person. So for example, I have some people who are our larger partners, and even though I'm not involved in the day-to-day desk work in our team anymore, I very rarely am involved in tickets. There are still some partners who, when they email in, they have so many sites with us that I get a notification on my phone. And I do that through IFTTT, where I have it going to my email, and then I also have it texting me so that I get a notification so that I know, okay, something is going on with this partner that they've emailed us and not just sent in a normal ticket. I need to find out what's going on right now. I would have never thought of that if I hadn't seen it. I saw it in IFTTT once that it was saying, set up this multi-step thing where, if this person says this and it has this text in it and it's from this person sent to this person, also send me a text message. I saw that for something that they had set up differently, and I thought, oh yeah, I can use that.
That's pretty smart, yeah.
Yeah. And then one of the things I also say is if your process can't be automated, rethink your process. That's something I've seen from a lot of companies. I worked with a business once who, back when I was a developer, they wanted help integrating their inventory system with their website because we'd now given them e-commerce. They didn't have e-commerce before. Well, the problem was they were saying, well, our inventory system doesn't work with any of the online inventory systems. And then they're also saying, we need it to work with the website because our inventory system isn't working. And then when I was showing them the options, that's when they were saying, well, none of these work the way we need it to work. And I said to them, if you're saying that you're having problems with your inventory system, and then I'm showing you the way that inventory systems work at other businesses, and you're saying no to those, the truth is they needed to rethink their inventory system. And that took a lot of discussion, but eventually they realized that, yes, if there's nobody else doing our inventory like this, and we're saying inventory is a problem, that means that our inventory is the problem. That's
a red flag, yeah.
Yeah. It's not that nobody's made a tool that you need. It's that you're not using the right tools. But I do that with anything. If you can't automate things, try and see what you can change to do it. If you can't automate some of your responses to people because you're putting in a lot of information that can't come from variables, then maybe you need to change what your responses are. Ultimately, people are going to care more that you get things done than whether you've done them manually. So that's why you need to organize and communicate. Because nobody can read your mind. Your customers can't read your mind. The people in your agency can't read your mind. The people in your company can't read your mind. The people who you rely on, your suppliers, the people who have developed the products that you maybe need to use to run your company, they can't read your mind. So you need to be organized and you need to communicate. That's one of the things that I see as probably the #1 breakdown between people within an agency. So we work with a ton of agencies. I'm sure you've heard us talk about that a few times this week, that we work with a lot of different agencies. And we can tell a lot of times within our first month of working with an agency, sometimes within our first day of talking with them, we can already start to tell if a partnership is going to work well or if it's going to have some issues. And a lot of that comes down to communication and organization. Because when we talk to somebody and we're talking to multiple people on a team, and then all of a sudden, we've sent something and all of a sudden we're getting emails from one of them and then emails from another one, and they're contradicting each other, or they're saying, why was this done? And we say, well, that's because your business partner told us to. We can tell that's one of those things that's causing an issue, and that's going to be a major issue to overcome. That's going to be a roadblock to scaling your MRR. If you're disorganized and you can't communicate, you're only going to be able to get so far. If Google had never learned to communicate amongst themselves, they would never have been able to take over the internet the way that they did. They were super organized. Their systems made a lot of sense, and they had good processes so that their company scaled extremely quickly. Because chaos doesn't scale. Some people like to live in chaos because they think it's fun and it's exciting. They also don't like to organize because they think it's boring. But the truth is that chaos doesn't scale. I mean, you show me a company that's chaotic, and we can look at their scale, and most likely they haven't scaled. Maybe they once scaled, but then under new leadership became chaotic, and then you'll see that scaling decrease, or you'll actually see them no longer scaling. You'll see them contracting. You see their profits going down, and that's just because overall, if things aren't organized, it can't scale the way that it really could if it was organized.
Yeah. And especially when you're dealing with multiple customers, you need to be organized just for the sake of finding the logins and keeping the logins secure that you need from your customers. And also, you need to keep track of how the website is set up, what type of plugins they use, what special use cases they have on the website. And if you then cannot communicate clearly in the answers to their support tickets, and you don't make it clear to them what information you need from them in order to support something, then your MRR is going to decrease faster than you can see, because nobody will get their tickets resolved with you.
Yeah, 100%. You're spot on there. You need to have organization from the beginning to the end. You need to be able to communicate internally and externally. And if you're not organized, you're not going to be able to do it. That's something that we're always working on here. And so one of the things that we've made sure not to do is that we don't rely on conversation. We've worked with a lot of people who, for everything, they always want to have a conversation. They always want to have like a call. They want us to give them a phone call, or they want to get on a video call. And yeah, there are some conversations that are best done face-to-face, even virtually over Zoom or something. But then there's a lot of things that are actually better off not being done in a conversation. And instead, they're better off being done by setting expectations and handling it almost like a project of how are we going to overcome these issues. And so that's one of those things that is the difference between chaos and organization is whether you are dealing with everything in a way that's scalable, or a way that's not. I mean, if you try and deal with every issue in a one-on-one basis of we're now going to talk for an hour about this one thing, and then
Yeah.
we'll do it again for the next issue that comes up and the next issue after that, you can't scale that. Nobody has time for that.
Yeah, that's exactly what James just pointed out in the comment as well. You would always be in catch-up mode if you were following that procedure. Great point, James.
Yeah. And so one of the things I like to tell people is you always need to assume that you will be completely unable to talk when needed. A lot of times we call that like the hit by a bus planning. So, I like to try and keep things documented. I like to over communicate in terms of having things written down that people can access whenever they need it, because I like to assume that tomorrow I could be hit by a bus. And so you won't be able to reach me. I'm not going to be able to communicate. I'm not going to be able to be on a computer. And so so I always want to have things in place for that. And so that's where people go wrong is if you don't document things, if you don't organize, if you don't have standard operating procedures, then you're always going to find that there's going to be those times when people need that information and you're not available. Maybe for us, like we're a 24/7 company. In the middle of the night for me is the middle of the day for other people on our team. And so they're working when I'm asleep. If everything had to be discussed with me in order for them to find the information, or if I only had the passwords to websites instead of having a secure system where the entire team can access it in an encrypted way, we're looking at issues that our team is going to have to deal with when I'm asleep. And basically those things can't be resolved.
Yeah.
So by organizing and communicating always, and not just in a conversation, but all the time, that's how you can make sure that you can scale. Because
what tool do you use for your documentation? Is it Teamwork Spaces so that you have all in one platform?
So that's actually something that we're redoing right now. And Teamwork Spaces is one of those ones we've been playing around with. We've been using Teamwork for that. We've been using some, like in Teamwork projects, we use a lot of documentation right in there, because that's how we run a lot of the things that are outside of the desk. Anything else that our company does, including the operations, a lot of that's done in Teamwork projects, which has now just been renamed as Teamwork. But we're also working on a little more of an interactive way of documentation. So I think that's actually something that I'd love to talk about sometime in the future once we've finished this project. Because it's a great time to ask it, because we're literally in the middle of this, where we've outgrown static documentation, and that's just read all of this, and now we're kind of going into a more interactive, where people can kind of look up what they need when they need it, and also they can almost wiki format. They can add to the documentation so that it's the whole team being involved, and we find that. A lot of the tools we've been using haven't quite done that. We're also working on possibly implementing Atlassian's Confluence software.
Yeah.
Yeah, that team we just know has a lot of good stuff. And so as we've looked at Confluence, it kind of brings documentation to the next level. And so
yeah, please ping me when you're done with that process. I would love to bring you back on for a webinar to talk about this.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's something we'd love to talk about. Yeah, so once you've kind of thought through your processes and organized and communicated, you're going to need to scale your team as you're scaling your MRR. Because if you try and keep the same 3 people, I mean, when I started, there were literally 5 of us at WP Buffs. If we tried to stay with the same 5 people and scale to where we are now, we would be so unbelievably overwhelmed. We would be completely ineffective for most people. But it's not just about hiring. You need to hire the right people. And so for most things, you're going to look to hire for organizational fit. That's a thing that in business people are always looking at is, do we hire for organizational fit, or do we hire for a task? Do we hire somebody who maybe doesn't quite fit in, maybe the things that they want are different than the things we want, but they can get a task done? And sometimes that's the right thing to do. If you just need somebody who's going to come in and they're going to, for example, do your like your payroll. Maybe they don't need to fit in with the organization because you just need them to do the payroll and do it well. But for most things, you're going to want to hire for organizational fit. An example is exactly what I was showing at the beginning of this session when I was talking about the way that my job has evolved, and that I went from happiness buff to lead happiness buff to COO. So I moved with the company, and now what I'm doing is completely different than what I was doing 3 years ago. And so the same thing happened with several people at the company. Allie Nimmons, who joined our company earlier this year, and she did her session this week as well. She is doing something completely different now with the company than when she started. And that's because she was brought on not just because she could do one thing, but because she was a good organizational fit. And that's what we're always looking at with people is, how do you fit in with working with our team? How can you grow with us?
So is that the best way to hire your support engineers, to maybe teach them the hard skills, but make sure that the soft skills and the work ethic and culture and stuff like that are on point with what you are expecting?
Yeah, exactly. Because your processes may change, your systems may change, and who knows, 10 years from now, maybe you don't want to only be doing WordPress. Maybe you maybe there's going to be a new CMS that works for other things, and you don't want to abandon WordPress, but maybe you also want to work with a different CMS or a different piece of software. And so you want people who don't just have those hard skills, like you said, who maybe know this one thing, but you want people who also can learn. You want people who have a proven record of success, because those people most likely are doing something different now than what they were doing 2 years ago. Even if they're in the same industry, even if they're working in the same software, their job has probably evolved. And you want those people who, they can learn, they can work, they can communicate, and they can collaborate. And so that's why you want to hire people who aren't just going to come in and do one thing, but who may come in and do one thing, but then, can maybe do something else. Or if the company changes, they can change with you.
That's so important. And just as an aside, there is a session with Matt Frost on the summit as well, which specifically talks about recruiting versus subcontracting. And Matt outlines the exact recruiting process that Themeco is using. So if you look at where Themeco is and how big they have grown, you know that recruiting process works. And if you want to dive into that, check out Matt Frost's session.
Yeah, definitely. Because what I'm saying, actually that next point, it's perfect that timing is, my very next point is exactly what he was really talking about, is hiring our contractors. And so for us, sometimes the answer is yes. Do we go with a contractor, or do we go with hiring somebody? And so the answer is yes, because maybe we're going to get a contractor, a subcontractor, who maybe will end up being internal, or maybe not. So what we like to do when we're hiring people is we only want to hire for jobs that must be internal. And so in that case, rather than contracting, hiring, bringing them in. Because one of those things is, we found that if we try and have like full employees who we are their only job for something that that's not really what we do, we find that that sometimes that limits us, because then that person, their only experience now is working with us. Whereas when we work with people who are contractors and working with multiple companies, they have a lot to bring with us. So a great example is our people ops manager. Shay is someone who she works with our team and she works intimately with us, but she actually is working for Women Who Code. So she's doing people ops with them. And so she's able to bring in a perspective of somebody who's worked with different companies that aren't necessarily in the WordPress space. And she's able to kind of help us all understand best practices. And just like like she brings things from what she's learned from them. She can also learn things from us or see things that work or maybe don't work at our company, and then also share that with the others. And so that's where having contractors can be really beneficial. So that's, yeah, contract out for anything that can be done externally. Don't always hire people just because you assume that employees are going to be better than contractors. We found that some of our best employees are employees, and some of our best contractors are just contractors, because some of the best people on our team are one or the other. They're not all one or the other.
Yeah.
It's what I'm sorry.
You made a really good point with that contractors bring in more flexibility and more experience. And I was just thinking that if you maintain multiple client websites, let's say you are at a scale of 25 to 50 websites, you need developers who have that experience, who have seen probably 100 or 200 sites, so that they can really quickly identify where the issue is when the support ticket comes in.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. And so aside from hiring, we've also got the importance of forming strategic partnerships. And really, that's what I think a lot of us here this week talking about, at the agency summit, we're looking for partnerships. A lot of us are here, we already have partnerships, or maybe we're looking at each other and saying, hey, how can we partner up? And that's one of those big things you can do to scale your MRR. Because if you try and go it alone, you're going to be limited. But if you form partnerships, either within the WordPress space or outside of the WordPress space, you can really, really go farther together and grow larger together. So one of the most important things in a partnership is you want to look for an organized partner who will make less work for you. And that's one of those things that I like to think that we at WP Buffs really bring to the table is we've spent a lot of time doing organization, and we have things extremely organized on the inside so that we can scale. But also for the people who partner up with us is we want to make sure that we're organized for them, because in order for our partners to be able to scale their MRR by joining our white label program, we need to be organized. Because if we're disorganized and people are sending their customers to us under the white label, so under the guise of us being a part of their company, if we're not organized, we make their company look bad. And also the same thing with the people that we partner with. So, if we partner up with a white label partner who's very disorganized, it can make us look bad, but it can also it can make more work for us. So to form that strategic partnership, it really goes both ways, and you want to have a good organized partnership. You don't want to spend all of your time just trying to fix communication errors. You want to make as little work as possible for everyone. And you do that by being an organized partner and finding organized partners.
Yeah. And I just want to bring the URL of the white label program on here real quick and share my experience, because I am a white label partner too. And what impressed me the most is the sophisticated onboarding sequence that you have, where within the first 5 days of bringing a website on, you have all the information and all the details you need. And you thought through every single little detail. It's so good that I would just recommend cloning the entire copy and rephrasing it for yourself so that you have the process down. But then also, as you said, the quality of communication in your team with my clients is exceptional, because you ensure that no matter who is answering a ticket, when I jump into these conversations, sometimes I see that various persons at various times answer the ticket or answer the question, but they don't ask the same questions over and over again. And that is what I see, what other companies struggle with outside of WordPress maintenance. It can be a hosting company, can be a Active Campaign, for example, can be anything really. They repeat the questions if they hand you over to another support engineer, whereas I very, very rarely see that with WP Buffs.
Yeah, absolutely. That's something that we strive for, and I'm glad that you shared that. I'm glad that that's been your experience, because that's exactly what I'm talking about today, and that's what we're what we're always striving to do at WP Buffs is we want to be organized and we want to communicate well. And so that actually goes perfectly into my next point, which is that you want us to manage ourselves and our team. So imagine how much work it would make for you as our partner if every time something was going on, I was completely just not handling, making sure that my team was all on the same page and organized. And imagine if you had to try and manage my team. And then same with, when we work with partners who have a lot of employees on their team, it's important that they manage things themselves, because sometimes the partnerships that really don't work out as well and sometimes don't work out at all are the ones where they're completely disorganized, they have poor communication, and then they expect us to somehow fix it. So their team is sending us conflicting pieces of information, conflicting requests. One person says, make the background blue. The other person says, make it red. And then they get mad at us and they say, well, why didn't you make it blue? Well, because, this other person said, make it red. So then we end up having to manage their team and go back to both of them and say, okay, you each sent conflicting requests. Like, what do you want us to do? And also we have to ask people, please discuss these things with your own team before you send them to us. And so that's when you're forming a strategic partnership, and if you really want to grow your MRR, you're going to need a strategic partner who manages themselves and their own team. You don't want to have to manage somebody else's team. And so that's one of those key things. And you want to set clear expectations both ways. So that's one of those things that, so like when you joined us as a partner, you had all those discussions with our team where we were setting expectations, not just what we expected from you, but most importantly, what you could expect from us, so that we have those clear expectations of how this is going to work, what we're going to do for you, how you can help us. And that's really important in partnerships. If you don't have clear expectations, you're just setting yourself up for issues. You're almost guaranteed going to end up finding that you don't agree with things because you don't have the same expectations. And you want to insist on clear communication. And that's something we try and do. If when we're just starting a partnership with someone or they're still in the process, everyone applies to be a partner with us, and it's something where we do vetting, and we take that seriously. We don't just let anyone become a partner with us. We like people like you who are organized and communicate well. And so that's one of those things is we always insist on clear communication. We don't want to work with people who are not interested in clearly communicating with us, because if they don't show any interest, and if we talk about having clear communication and they say that that's not their problem, that we have to deal with it, it's not going to work. And in the end, it's not going to help us grow our MRR because this partnership's not going to work. And then it's not going to help them grow because their MRR is going to be limited by the poor communication as well.
And that also goes for bringing on maintenance clients as well. Because if you have clients, as you said earlier, that always insist on a call and that always text you Friday evening, 10 p.m., and they want some really urgent change, which could be nothing but urgent, it's just going to suck so much energy out of you and distract you from the important clients, the ones that actually do follow your processes and do honor the expectations that you set and the rules that you put in place, that you just have to fire them at some point, even if you depend on the money, I would say, because then you can spend more energy on bringing on the right fit of clients and scale the business faster.
Yep, absolutely, 100%. You want clear communication on all levels. So another thing you can do that gets overlooked a lot, but we found it works really well, is building a community of evangelists. You want people who are going to go out there and talk about your company, because a personal recommendation is the strongest referral. I know for me, if I see 10 ads for 10 different products, I'm going to view them all as probably the same. I might say, oh, this one does more of what I need. But if somebody that I trust, somebody that I know says, oh yeah, you want to go with this one. So for example, microphones. I have gotten a lot of people who actually refer Rode microphones to me. I haven't always used
using one here.
What was that?
I'm using one right now.
Yeah, yep, exactly. Same with me. I've got one Rode microphone there, and I've got one that's what you're hearing me on right now. And so for my setup, I'm using those products. I didn't use them because I researched them and found that they did what I need. I'm using them because I had so many personal recommendations from people that I looked up to, both in people that I follow on YouTube, or other people within the WordPress space, who said these products are great, they work really well for me, and that's what's put me over the edge and to say that's who I'm going to go with. And that goes for anything. A hosting company, yeah, you can look up as many things of a hosting company and maybe try and figure out which one's going to be your best. But let's be honest, most people, when they're reviewing a hosting company, they're looking at the reviews. They're looking to see how many negative reviews do you have and how many positive reviews. And then if they know somebody who uses that hosting, they're going to take that as probably the strongest one. That's the one that if you know somebody and you respect somebody's opinion and they say, I use this company, I partner with this agency, you're going to want to do the same. And the truth is that hiring a sales and marketing team is expensive. It doesn't scale quite the same as referrals do. Not saying you shouldn't have a sales and marketing team, but you shouldn't rely on that as your only way. You shouldn't say that all sales, all marketing, people are always going to hear from our marketing team and that's how they're going to learn about us. You want to have it be something where they're hearing from other people as well, because that's the difference. Is a marketing team and a sales team, really their reach is going to be linear. So as their team continues, as your sales and marketing team continues to grow, it's going to go like this. But if you start employing all these people, so you've got your sales and marketing team, but then all of a sudden you bring in all the people you work with and you say, hey, would you recommend us? Either having them sign up to an official affiliate program, or whether it's more of an informal of just saying to people, hey, if you like us, we would love if you would tell people about us. And that's something that we do with companies, especially hosting companies that we love. We recommend a certain group of them, not just because they have good affiliate programs, but because they're ones that we actually know and use and love. And so we see the same thing happen where a lot of people come into us not because they saw maybe we put out an ad or maybe they saw some email we sent out, but instead a lot of people say they come to us because somebody else said, oh, I use WP Buffs and I love them. I can't have my business without them. And those are the people who come in, and that just really makes it exponential. So instead of growing like this, that's where you get that point where it really starts growing up.
Yeah. And at the same time, it also forces you to deliver really, really quality service and to value the people that you are working with. Because if you're delivering just mediocre results for your clients or white label partners, then you won't get these evangelists.
Yep, exactly. And so part of that is also you want to give as well as you get. You don't want to just expect everybody to evangelize for you, and then you don't want to tell them, okay, go tell everyone about us, and then do nothing for them. And so that's one of those things that we do with our partnerships. That's one of those benefits of being one of our white label partners, is that we are going to recommend you to people. And yeah, so that really just comes to my final point, which is that planning and partnering are the keys to scaling your MRR. That's why I'm here. That's what I'm here to say today, is that that's something that you need to do. If you want to scale your MRR, you can't just rely on figuring things out on your own. You want to plan things and you want to partner. So look at those two things. Figure out what do my customers need and who can help me provide it.
That is a fantastic point, and that is also what I hope came across during the entire event. As you said earlier, it's all about forming the strategic partnerships that can multiply each other's businesses, really. And I think that every single one of these sponsors can be a potential strategic partner. And WP Buffs, personally for me, is a really important one. Not just because I'm making money by being a white label partner, but also I am really good friends with the people at the team with WP Buffs. And I can just reach out to Dean, for example, that we've seen in a webinar yesterday and just bounce ideas back and forth and have conversations about, hey, what do you think about this approach? What do you think about that approach? And that is, I think, where the real power in partnerships is, because you have somebody who's striving towards the same goal, who's talking to a similar type of audience, and that you can just pick their brains on. And we don't have any questions coming in right now. So I have just one more request for the people watching this, and that is that you try to win the Logitech StreamCam in the booth of WP Buffs, because that is a really, really exciting giveaway. Besides getting a cool cap like you have, Nick, I definitely have to get a hold of one of those myself. Oh, and the t-shirt. I love it. So head over to wpagencysummit.com/WPBuffs. No matter whether you use the hyphen or not, you will land on the right space in any time. If you have any questions for Nick, you've seen the contact details on the slides. It's Nick Adams TV on Facebook and on Twitter, and at the WP Buffs on Twitter as well. And obviously everything is linked in the booth. Nick, thank you so much for coming on and sharing these wisdom with us.
Thank you. Great conversation.